Hey, guess what's happening on this week's episode of the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle Podcast with your friend and host, Oscar Camejo.
Hey, folks, if you or someone you know recently had a doctor's appointment and you learn that you're at risk of or have developed prediabetes or even type 2 diabetes, the news is probably scary. I know the feeling, I know it firsthand. But as I later learned, diabetes is not an automatic death sentence. It doesn't have to be. Depending on your situation or your loved one's situation, prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, to be specific, can be controlled with some lifestyle changes and medical treatment where necessary. You know, in many cases, prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, which is what I dealt with at some point, can be reversed or sent into remission, as they say. But the key is how. So, in this two-part podcast series, my goal is to share with you my personal journey and the steps I took to begin taking control of diabetes and the things I did to start achieving good health. Today, I'm off diabetes medication, including insulin, and I'm happy about it. I learned what I needed to do and I put things into practice so I can reverse type 2 diabetes. I was able to lose over 80 pounds in less than a year, folks. And most importantly, I'm alive to tell my story of how I reversed type 2 diabetes so that I can help others transform their lives too. So, in this week's episode, you can expect to learn practical ways to finally take control of type 2 diabetes, including prediabetes. You're also going to receive my recommendations on how to start making lifestyle changes to reverse the condition of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So, hey, stay tuned and listen to the rest of today's podcast. You don't want to miss it. Let's go. Welcome to the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle Podcast with me, your host, Oscar Camejo. My goal is to help diabetics and non-diabetics make lifestyle changes to reverse and even prevent type 2 diabetes. You know, when I was 268 pounds, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes back in August 2020. It was clear back then that I needed to make some changes, but it wasn't easy. I needed to learn what I needed to do to take control of my whole diagnosis and my situation. My size and my overconsumption of food and sugary drinks, they were negatively impacting my health, folks. But you know what? Despite what was going on, I had to learn and I had to execute whatever I needed to do to start taking control of diabetes. I had to make lifestyle changes for better health. And that's what I want to help you do today, whether it's you or your loved ones. But before we get into some practical steps, I want to first thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. It is such a pleasure to have folks tuning in literally from over 35 countries and to find out that people are following me on social media and leaving reviews and sending me emails. Keep on following. I'm going to be sharing some more practical tips and recommendations every week so that I can help folks turn their lives around and make lifestyle changes to live better. So thank you again for tuning in. Now let's go over some diabetes statistics. I know how it can be. You know, you hear a lot of statistics and percentages, and that makes sometimes things more complicated than they need to be. But I want to keep things practical. But I think it's very important to understand the perspective of the effects of diabetes and how many people actually have it and may not even realize that they're struggling with type 2 diabetes or even have prediabetes because to them, they don't have any signs or they just believe that, okay, hey, nothing's going on. I feel okay. Or, I'll just wait till something happens before I go and see a doctor. So here's some statistics specifically on prediabetes. When it comes to prediabetes, it is said that over 90 million people over the age of 18 have prediabetes. That's here in the United States. So that's roughly 38%. Now, for those who are 65 years or older, it is estimated that roughly 26.4 million people here in the US, that's about 48%, have pre-diabetes. That's a lot of folks. And it is also estimated that 1.4 million new cases of diabetes were diagnosed among people ages 18 and older in 2019. Now, this information came from the CDC's National Diabetes Statistics report, which I believe came out in 2022. So it's really eye opening, and some of this information you can also find at the American Diabetes Association website and some other places, so you can cross reference. But the point is, folks, diabetes, specifically pre-diabetes, is being diagnosed more and more. Now, there's a difference between pre-diabetes and diabetes. I won't go into that just now or just yet, but check this out. When it comes to diabetes, it is said that here in the U.S., about 37.3 million people have diabetes. And of those who were diagnosed, you're talking about 28.7 million people. That's a lot, folks. Now, for those who are undiagnosed, meaning they could be walking around with diabetes and don't even know it, that's about 8.5 million people. So, hearing these statistics about prediabetes and diabetes, it should be eye opening, folks. I know for me, it was eye opening, but not until I would develop type 2 diabetes. But there are certain risk factors for diabetes related complications. And we're going to go over that in a second, but I want to bring all of this into perspective as it relates to taking control of diabetes. Now, some people they believe, well, hey, you just gonna either you're gonna catch it or you don't. There's really nothing that you can do about it. So you might as well just live your life, enjoy your life, eat whatever you want because there's really nothing you can do. If you catch it, you catch it. Nothing, there's nothing you can do. Well, folks, why put yourself in a position when you can prevent certain diseases like diabetes? It is said that diabetes can be prevented by lowering certain risks. And we're going to go over that in just a moment. But again, diabetes and pre-diabetes are growing in terms of diagnosis. So we definitely want to pay attention to what's going on in our personal life. And let's help spread the news and spread the word and create more awareness. Many of us know someone who has dealt with diabetes, whether they are pre-diabetic or full blown diabetic. We know folks who may be struggling with it. I know I've lost a couple of friends to diabetes. I have had people that I know who've lost limbs because of this, people who've lost eyesight. And, you just hear stories after stories and people needing liver transplants and having to go through all of these different medical procedures because of diabetes and the complications related to diabetes. And my goal, folks, really is to save lives and save limbs. So that's what I'm going to do and do my best to do my part. I know I'm not a physician, but I'm going to learn as much as I can so I can create greater awareness. So I'm asking you to do the same, whether it's for yourself or someone that you love. So let's move on. Now, there are certain risk factors for diabetes related complications. Basically, certain risks factors that can contribute to someone developing prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. With these risks, I want us to pay attention. One of the risk factors is smoking, another is overweight and obesity, physical inactivity, your A1C above normal, Your A1C basically is your blood sugar range over a 3 month period or so. Once they do your fasting blood sugar test, they'll see, okay, well, yeah, your numbers are above XYZ, or they fall within this range of normal, or they're above normal, and so forth. So when your A1C is above normal, you could either fall into that pre-diabetes stage, or the straight up or full blown type 2 diabetes. We'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Another risk factor is high blood pressure and also high cholesterol. Now, folks, I dealt with all of these that I just listed, except for smoking. I was never a smoker. Not at all. Not ever. Don't ever plan. I don't ever plan to be a smoker. Smoking was not my thing, but I did gain a lot of weight, in a short period of time. And it didn't happen overnight. I became obese. I was not very physically active. My A1C did go above normal, but I didn't really pay attention to it, and I kind of ignored what was going on, ignored that initial diagnosis, and it cost me, folks. I ended up developing type 2 diabetes because I wouldn't listen and I wouldn't put into practice things that my physician was telling me early on. I ended up having to deal with high blood pressure, and the complications related to high blood pressure. And maybe one day I'll tell you about my heart issue that I had to deal with. Well, I shouldn't say my heart issue, and heart issue that I dealt with as it related to high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And thank God I made it through, folks. And I'm here to tell you that you can turn things around. I did it, and so can you. All right, let's keep going. Now, folks, this is part one of the process of beginning to take control of diabetes. There's no way that I can possibly cover everything in one episode, not even two episodes. So I'm going to do my part in this episode to really just lay a foundation. And then in future episodes, we'll be picking this topic back up and keeping it going. Okay, so how to begin taking control of diabetes. Folks, no one likes to feel as if they don't have a sense of control. It's one of the scariest feelings that you can have, not having control over your health and not knowing what's going on, not knowing what's going on in your body because you can't see in your body on your own. So, but you're not feeling well, or things are just not clicking like they need to. And it can be very scary. Oftentimes, fear sets in because of the unknown. We don't know what's going on. It's like the kid who is scared of the dark. He's afraid because he can't see into the darkness. You don't know what's lurking there or what may just pop out. And so, just like that, that fear just kind of grips you. The same is true when it comes to being diagnosed with diabetes, whether it's pre-diabetes or type 2 diabetes. Now, folks, I dealt with pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. I did not deal with or ever have type 1 diabetes, obviously. But again, there is diabetes or type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And of course, there's pre-diabetes. There are differences between all three. So, but for the purpose of the rest of this podcast, we're going to focus mainly on pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Some people dread the unknown, like I mentioned. They go through a whirlwind of emotions. They go from the shock when they first hear the news to the denial, the disbelief, the fear and the anxiety and all kind of emotions start just coming as a result of getting the news for some people. And then they start thinking like, well, what does this mean? Am I going to die? Is my leg going to be amputated? Am I going to lose some toes? Am I going to go blind? Do I have to be on meds for the rest of my life? I mean, there's tons of questions that I know were on my mind when I first learned about type 2 diabetes, because my reference point was the people I knew who died or had legs amputated or toes amputated, people who I heard who went blind and so forth. So fear and anxiety can be overwhelming during that time. You or your loved one could be confused or even concerned about what you can and can't eat anymore. You may be wondering if you have to completely give up your favorite dessert, the chocolate cakes and the donuts and stuff like that. And you're like, oh man, I have to now eat rabbit food for the rest of my life. And I hate salads. And, so you just kind of, you worry. That was my situation back in 2018 when I was first diagnosed with pre-diabetes. And then 2 years later, being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. At first being diagnosed with pre-diabetes, I honestly didn't take things very seriously. Yeah, I was like, okay, well, yeah, my doctor sent me home with a sheet of paper to say, hey, eat better, lose weight. And that was it. And here's some recommended diets to try out and so forth. But I was kind of nonchalant about it. I was like, well, at least I don't have type 2 diabetes straight up, until I had a diabetes episode and had to go to the hospital, to the emergency room, and they admitted me. And I was there for about 5 or 6 days and learned that I had type 2 diabetes in the hospital. And that's when it became real, folks. I remember sitting in the hospital, needles in my arm. They had to pump me with IV fluid to hydrate my body, and I was so exhausted. It was all kind of stuff was going on that weekend, and for those actually 5 or 6 days, and I had to, really think about my life and did I want to live? And of course, I wanted to live, but I had to make some changes. But folks, I was in shock and I was clueless what to do. I was clueless what to expect. My doctor told me, I eventually went to go see my doctor after the hospitalization. And to be honest, my doctor didn't make me feel better or worse. He did tell me these are the facts. This is what's going on. And things can get better, but, we got to see what's going to happen. But you, sir, have to make some changes. Of course, he focused more on the medicine because, like most physicians, they want to immediately deal with what's going on right then and there. But it was up to me to take it a step further. I had to formulate a plan to get back on track, and so that's what I want to talk to you about next, and that's having a game plan. So again, this is going to be part one. I'm not going to be able to cover everything because it's a lot of information when it comes to taking control of diabetes, particularly pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Now, one of the things I definitely recommend to get started is diabetes education. You have to increase your understanding of to know what's the difference between pre-diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and type 2 diabetes, and knowing exactly what's going on with you. When I was in the hospital, they were flooding me with a whole bunch of information, and they were telling me about going and seeing a diabetes educator. I had never heard of a diabetes educator before, didn't know what it was, who it was, what they were responsible for. I had to do the work to go find out. And unfortunately, yes, I was very serious about changing my life, but because it was so much information, I didn't know where to start. I was told, okay, contact this one particular place and they can get you set up. But, when you're going through all this stuff by yourself, it was so overwhelming. And I went through periods of, sadness and depression. And I'm like, man, this is just a lot. But I do encourage you, no matter how you're feeling, no matter what you're going through, you have to educate yourself when it comes to diabetes education because knowledge is power, folks. So eventually I made it a point to learn as much as I can about the root cause of type 2 diabetes and what a healthy body is supposed to be able to do naturally. I started enjoying and learning about anatomy. I started learning about the pancreas and the liver. I started to learn what the pancreas is supposed to do and what's the role that it plays in producing insulin, because that word insulin was coming up, and it was like, okay, I thought insulin was just an injection, but I later learned that actually the pancreas creates insulin. Insulin is that hormone that helps to regulate blood sugar, helps to soak up blood sugar or transport blood glucose or sugar from your bloodstream into your cells. And then what happens when the pancreas is overworked, and I eventually learned about insulin resistance and how your body becomes resistant to the effects of insulin. And that's why your blood sugar, or sugar in the blood, as they call it, remains in the blood. We're not supposed to have blood sugar just so elevated and that it remains in the bloodstream. It's supposed to be removed from the bloodstream and go into your cells to be used as energy. So, learning about anatomy and learning about liver and what fatty liver disease is, and how fat is increased and created in the body. I learned about subcutaneous fat versus visceral fat. And I was like, oh, so that's why my stomach is poking out, and I can't, see my feet. Because the production of fat has increased around in my body. And so when it came to losing weight, it wasn't just about losing any kind of weight. I needed to lose fat. So I wanted to know what losing weight had to do with taking control of diabetes. You see, folks, there's so much information that we need to learn in order to take control of diabetes, but it is going to start with being educated. If we fail to educate ourselves, it's going to be easy for us to remain where we are. So I encourage you and your loved one, if it's your loved one who's dealing with prediabetes or diabetes, is to learn more about diabetes. I can't stress that enough. Okay, moving on. Know where you stand, or your loved ones. That you have to know where you stand by knowing the problem and the solutions. Now, when I say knowing where you stand, it's knowing for sure, absolutely, with absolute certainty. Do you have prediabetes, or do you have straight up type 2 diabetes? Because knowing what's going on in your body will help you to make a conscious decision as to now what's the game plan. For example, when it comes to knowing whether you are pre-diabetic or you have a full-blown diabetes, know what is your last fasting blood glucose level. When it comes to pre-diabetes, there's a range. When it comes to type 2 diabetes, full-blown, there is a range. If you exceed normal or just above normal, you are considered pre-diabetes. Or if you exceed even the pre-diabetes, okay, then you fall within that category of being a full-blown diabetic. And I can go over the stats with you and what those are, what the percentages are. For example, when you go to the doctor, they'll do a blood test if they haven't done already, a blood test on you when you're fasting. That those numbers will come back and say, okay, so your blood glucose level is, let's say, for example, 110 milligrams per deciliter to 125 milligrams per deciliter. If it falls within that range, then you're considered pre-diabetic or you have pre-diabetes. Or let's say if it's your fasting blood glucose level is 126 milligrams per deciliter, or between 126 and 104 milligrams per deciliter, then that's considered diabetes. And if you exceed 200 milligrams per deciliter, that is still considered diabetes, but you're in that range where it's like, okay, you need more than just diet, more than just exercise. You're going to need some medication and insulin injections and so forth. But again, I'm not a physician. Your physician will tell you exactly where you are, where you stand, knowing what the problem is and what the solution is. Because if you're in that pre-diabetes range, My friend, well, that's good news because it is said or believed that with a simple regimen of changing your diet and your exercise, you can get your blood glucose levels back down to normal. So don't be like how I was when I was first diagnosed with prediabetes. I didn't take it seriously enough. And I wish I had, really looking back in 2018, I wish I had taken my doctor's recommendation and change my eating right then and there. So I wouldn't have had to deal with all the diabetes complications later on and spending so much money on medication and having to take insulin injections 3 times a day and was worried about, if I inject myself with too much insulin, am I going to die? And all this kind of stuff was going on in my head. So again, your doctor is going to prescribe the proper treatment for you. I can't advise you on that. I'm not a physician. So definitely do what your doctor recommends, as long as it's definitely safe for you and you have a clear understanding of what you're doing to begin your treatment. Okay. Another thing is you want to keep tabs on your blood sugar. Now, you're not going to be going to the doctor every day, but you can get a blood sugar monitor where you can, of course, prick yourself on your finger and you get this little tab thing and you put it in this little device, and the device tells you what your blood sugar level is at that point. I know for me, I was checking it like, whew, probably 3, 4 times a day because I was just worried, man. After anything that I would eat, I was like, okay, if I ate an apple, what is it doing to my body? And it was just, I was just operating in fear. But then it got to the point where it's like now, I still, even though I reversed type 2 diabetes and sent it into remission, I still check it every morning, just because I just like to keep a tab of my numbers and so forth. I'm not concerned and worried. But no, I no longer check my blood sugar levels every hour on the hour, which honestly I did at one point. It was crazy because I did it out of fear. I was nervous and so forth. In any case, there are also some what they call continuous blood glucose monitors, where you put it on the back of your arm, or you can wear it close to your abdomen, and you can get blood sugar levels just instantaneously through an app. So I tried that for a while when I was going through my diagnosis, excuse me, when I was going through my healing process, if you will, and I no longer needed it. And I feel great. I was able to reverse type 2 diabetes, but I had to do some practical things. So, lastly, I want you to start focusing on losing the excess weight that you may be carrying. For me, I was 268 pounds, as I mentioned, and I was able to lose over 80 pounds because I started taking it seriously. Now, I'm not going to go in, not in this episode, I'm not going to go into specific weight loss techniques and things that I did, but I do want you to start thinking about the importance of losing that excess weight. Because, folks, I learned from my doctor and I learned through research that carrying that excess weight on your body made it more easy for me to, and millions of other people, to be susceptible to insulin resistance, to other complications, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, and hypertension, and so forth. And besides, I didn't like how I looked in the mirror. It got to the point where I literally started hating myself. So, Lou, I don't know where you are. How do you feel about your weight? But I don't want you to be used to just being big or being overweight and obese and just thinking that, hey, I don't need to make any changes. I'm just going to stay big and just eat whatever I want. Well, folks, I know everyone's situation is different. I would never body shame anybody. That's never been my thing, and never will be, because I know what it is to, carry a lot of excess weight. But my friend, please, please, please consider losing the extra weight. that you may be carrying, because it's not good for you. It's not good for your health. I'm not saying that being overweight automatically means that you're not healthy, but why carry around the excess weight if you don't need to? If you're wanting to have more energy, more vitality, you want to take control of your blood sugar, you want to take control of type 2 diabetes, then my friend, I definitely recommend that you consider losing the excess weight. And you may already be there. You may be like, hey, Oscar, I'm ready to go. I've been trying to get into the gym. I've been trying to eat well and eating better and so forth. But I'm struggling. Well, my friend, in the next episode, I'm going to walk you through part two of setting up your game plan by taking control of diabetes through some weight loss techniques and so forth, and kind of walk you through what I did. So, be encouraged. And as I close today's episode, I want to leave a message or share a message to the loved ones of those who have been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Now, this is very important because, when someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, it can be very scary, as I mentioned before. But there's nothing like having a support system and having people in your corner that will have your back until you reach your goals and so forth. Unfortunately, folks, I had to go through this alone. And I wish I had people in my corner that I can trust. And I'm not going to go into specific details in this particular episode as to what I was going through. But I will share this message to, again, the loved ones of those who have been diagnosed with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Please be supportive, and being supportive really means get on board with helping your loved one. I mean, really get on board. You can have the attitude of like, well, hey, you got yourself into this partner. You got to go and figure this thing out on your own. Please do not do that. Please get on board, come alongside that person, and definitely avoid shaming them into changing, getting on somebody's case about how they're eating and maybe not taking their meds and not going to the doctor. That's probably making it worse. Please avoid shaming somebody into changing. Help them to come to the realization that they need to change. Be encouraging, be motivating. If you have to go to the doctor with them, don't give them ultimatums. It's crazy. It's dumb. Don't do that. Please don't. Again, don't leave them alone to try to figure things out on their own, folks. Yes, I had to do it. I had to muster the courage and the resilience to do it, the motivation to do it, the inspiration to do it. But again, I wish I had the support that I didn't have. Also, I want you to consider being actively engaged in that support system, and getting on board. And being actively engaged could mean various things. When that person is looking at changing their diet, find out what they need to do, walk with them. Maybe it will help you as well, to maybe change your lifestyle of eating, exercising with that person, helping them to stay on top of taking their medications as long as, they need to take the medications and so forth. But be actively engaged. If they get a new book, you know, maybe ask them about the book, ask them about, the things that they're learning, so that they can, share with you what's going on. And definitely, this is big. Be patient. Your loved one may be irritable because, listen, they just got some bad news. They could be feeling depressed and feeling hopeless and just feeling like the world is going to end. The worst thing you can do is not be patient. The worst thing you can do is be overbearing and so forth, and being irritated with them and so forth. It's just not good, folks. And another thing is, I want you to do more listening and less talking. Listen, folks, it's important to allow your loved one to vocalize how you can best support them. Now, you may have in your mind, oh, I need to support them this way. But if you don't take the time to be quiet and listen and allow them to tell you the support that they need from you, then how can you be really on board with helping to support them? Or doing your best to be supportive, your best to be on board. So hopefully you get what I'm saying. Just be more supportive, be more loving, be patient, be actively engaged. Don't leave them alone to try to figure them things out. Just be a good listener, do less talking and more listening. It'll go a long way. Folks, at the end of the day, my goal is to help people to get healthier, to get to a healthy weight, to live and feel better, to be focused, to be more focused, to be fit, to be more fit, and to feel alive every day. Because, folks, that's how I feel. I feel strong. I feel committed to carrying this thing out. So, as always, I want to leave you with this: stay focused, keep moving, never go back, leap forward, bounce back because you can, my friend. And above all else, trust God. You got this. I believe in you. Be sure to visit the website at www.beatingdiabetieslifestyle.com for access to free resources and other information that will help you along your journey. If you would like to submit a question or a comment about the show or to learn more about the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle, you can always email me at hello@beatingdiabetieslifestyle.com. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this podcast.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Beating Diabetes Lifestyle Podcast with Oscar Camejo. We hope you enjoyed this episode. As a reminder, this podcast is intended for motivational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional care by a physician or other healthcare professional or qualified fitness instructor. This podcast is provided on the understanding that it does not constitute medical or professional advice or services. If you're looking for help on your journey, seek a qualified medical practitioner. It's important that you utilize someone who is a trained, licensed healthcare professional who can help you on your journey toward good health.